Welcome to this edition of the VR Mentor Series. The VR Mentor Series is designed specifically to give small business owners and managers the tools, skills, and strategies necessary to achieve and maintain business success by achieving their business goals. The host is Don Taylor. Don has personally founded or acquired numerous companies. Watching the baby boomers, he recognized a unique niche opportunity in the real estate industry. In 1976, Don founded Help You Sell Real Estate. In accordance with his exit strategy, he sold Help You Sell in 1986 to Mutual Benefit Life. Don's uncanny marketing and business systems were chronicled in Robert Tucker's book, Managing the Future, The 10 Driving Forces of Change in the 90s. Always looking for the next opportunity, Don again turned to the baby boomers. He noticed the decline of corporate job security. He figured that many ousted employees would turn into entrepreneurs. Don also saw the huge influx of immigrants that were, and are, eager to experience the American dream of owning and operating their own businesses. He anticipated massive growth in the number of small businesses. VR was the natural choice. Don and his partner Les Durier acquired the VR Business Brokers Network in October 1991. They restructured the company and relocated from Boston to Newport Beach, California in 1992. VR sells more businesses in the USA than anyone. Of course, the easiest businesses to sell are those that are profitable. So this tape series is in part self-serving. You benefit by learning proven systems, strategies, and techniques that you as a small business owner can use to build a more profitable business. If in the future you want to buy or sell a business, hopefully you'll think of VR. Now on to this edition of the VR Mentor Series, featuring Daniel S. Pena Sr. and his 7-step plan to grow your business. Dan is the founder and former chairman and CEO of Great Western Resources Incorporated, a Houston-based natural resource company. Dan started Great Western in July 1982 with $820 and a leased fax machine. 8 years later, the company was worth more than $400 million. This astonishing growth captured the attention of a number of entrepreneurs and CEOs who sought Dan out because they wanted to learn how he grew so big in a short period of time. Now, in addition to his business pursuits, Dan also conducts training programs on how to experience what he calls the quantum leap.
Dan, I want to thank you very much for joining me here today. I know the audience is going to be thrilled to hear your 7 steps to grow their own business, and that I've known you now for, 7 or 8 months. It's been absolutely fantastic. I've been to I don't know how many of your seminars. Your castle in Scotland was just beautiful. The ambiance, it was just fantastic. And I'm really excited about you sharing your knowledge with our audience. Why don't we start off a little bit about how did you create your the personal foundation?
First of all, I want to thank you for having me back. It's not often that I get to be interviewed by somebody that has his name and his company in front of as many people and as many businesses as you do. And I appreciate the opportunity for that exposure. How I created the quantum leap philosophy. When I first got started in business on Wall Street, I saw many people make geometric growth happen like if it was an everyday occurrence. And so I studied that and I looked at it. And when I saw the first oil embargo happen in 1973, while I was sitting in gas lines in Los Angeles and various parts of the country, I thought that what I wanted to do eventually is I wanted to go out and build my own business philosophy, and I wanted to have geometric quantum growth. I wasn't interested in arithmetic growth because I saw it happen so often. So that's the first idea that I had about the quantum leap philosophy. As you probably know, and as some of the listeners probably know, quantum leap has become very vogue. I mean, everybody's got a quantum leap. In fact, I was watching television this morning before I came over here, in Anderson Consulting, the big consulting company, one of the biggest in the world, new commercial is called Don't Leapfrog Your Way Through Life, Quantum Leapfrog Your Way Through Life. So I'm really pleased that so many people have copied it, and that's why I'm really thrilled to be able to sit here with you and talk about it again. So that's the genesis, if you will, of how I came up with the idea originally. And so therefore you weren't in the oil business? Oh, no. I mean, the oil business came as an afterthought. It was a good afterthought. Yes, it was. I mean, I was able to make a lot of money in the oil business, the energy business. But no, it had nothing to do with that. In fact, quite the opposite. I mean, quantum leap methodology works across the board. It works in, if you have a meat market to a a grocery store to an insurance agency, if you're a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, the thought process works in virtually every aspect of business.
Right. As I remember meeting some of the people who have gone to your seminar, a fellow that had a jewelry business. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what he did? He was a small business owner, and after taking your seminar, had a quantum leap in his success.
The gentleman that you're referring to is a fellow named Casey Stevenson. He attended a seminar on May the 22nd of 1993. In fact, it was the first seminar that I gave after I retired from Great Western Resources. And he had a business that did roughly $200,000 a year in revenue, very much like many of the listeners in the companies that you do business with every day.
Those are our audience.
Yes. Using the methodology almost verbatim, as you know, I have two models in the book, because basically there's only two ways to grow a business, in my judgment: internally, externally. I mean, quite simplistically. He took one of the models, the external model, and he decided to buy another company that was much bigger than his own, and he now is the owner and he runs the oldest jewelry company in the state of California. I think it was founded in 1857 or something. And in the first 12 months of using the quantum leap methodology, he made just less than $1 million. His net worth increased by almost exactly $1 million.
Wow, that is just unbelievable. And that's strictly from going to your seminar, adapting your methods, applying them to the marketplace, and bam, this huge increase. This quantum leap.
That's correct. I mean, he worked extremely hard. He thought about nothing else to the exclusion. Like if he were here, he would say, I used to go to the gym 5 days a week. Now, maybe I only go once or twice a week. He even postponed his wedding to make sure that the deal closed. But we have a lot of examples like that. I think you probably met Bruce Whipple, that attended one of the seminars, and I think he might have even attended the seminar that you attended. And one of the ideas that he garnered from the quantum leap methodology, which for those of you that are listening that are in sales, this is going to perhaps make you feel a little uncomfortable. When I took a look at his business and he applied my precepts, he decided he should throw all his prospects away, and he's in the selling business because he had kept his prospects too long, and he decided to upgrade his prospects and go after much larger prospects. And with the space of about a year to a year and a half, he more than sextupled his sales base just from going after new prospects, that he wasn't wasting time on people that he thought were prospects, were really not even suspects.
Yeah, in fact, that was really amazing to me when you mentioned before that you had told him the first thing to do was throw away all your prospects.
Yes.
Yeah, now, I mean, that's something that you just don't hear in anybody's seminar. So why did you come up with that?
Well, I used to be in sales. I started on Wall Street, and I've made over 50,000 business decisions since I've been in business 20 plus years. And on Wall Street, when I was in institutional sales, the easiest thing for me to do was go call on a customer like TWA who I knew and take them to lunch, because it wasn't like making a cold call. The hardest thing for me to do, and I'm a good salesman, was to introduce myself to a new prospect that might buy something from our institutional line of products at that time. And so I learned early on, the harder the prospect was, the more gratifying the sale was. And so I learned that high-performance people do what normally makes regular people nauseous, so to speak.
Right.
And so I knew that he was getting comfortable with the prospects that he had, for some of them as long as 3 years.
Right, and that was stopping his growth.
Absolutely.
That was one of your first observations.
That was the very first observation.
All right. And then from that time, he has, what did you say, quadrupled or sextupled?
Sextupled.
Sixtupled.
Sextupled, yeah.
And what was length of time was that?
Well, he attended the seminar, I believe it was June of 1993 in Newark, New Jersey, downtown Newark, near the Meadowlands, as I recall. And this would have happened in about 13 or 14 months' time. And he literally threw away, must have been 100 or 125 prospects that he had been working on, and carved a new base of about, I believe, 10 or 15 prospects. And one of the things that he also learned at the seminar, that you've heard me say many, many times, high-performance people focus on the very few,
yes,
not the many. And I focus on 2 or 3 things at a time, period. And other high-performance people focus on very few things, not a whole bunch of things. And so Bruce Whipple took that to its nth degree and decided that whereas everybody that he was competing against, normally everybody in the Fortune 500 were their prospects, he decided to hone in on 10 or 15 of the Fortune 50. And I might add, he's added about 11 or 12 Fortune 50 customers to his list.
Wow. That is just really, really great. Now, what type of business was he in?
He runs a company called Audit Cost International out of upper state New York, and he goes in and he helps companies reduce their utility bills, their real estate taxes, their phone bills. He goes in and he only gets a portion of the money he saves. No upfront fees. If he saves them $10,000, he gets like 30%, or if he saves them $5 million, he gets like 10 or 15% of the amount he saves the corporations.
All right, so here we have somebody who is in the jewelry business.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have somebody who is in the auditing business.
Yes.
I met a young lady that I just thought she was just fantastic. I met her, I believe, in Scotland for the first time, Burl Crump. And now she is a builder, if I recall.
Yes, Burl's from Ottawa, Canada, and she's a real estate person that was so successful in real estate that she went into the building business, but she was really less successful in that. Now, you have to imagine for a moment, this is a man-dominated business.
Yes.
And to be the CEO of a construction company in Ottawa, Canada is fairly unusual. But she took the precepts and decided she was choking her business. A lot of the people that are listening to this tape are probably what I call control freaks. They choke their business. They're very much interested in cost control. Well, that's good, but the most important thing is revenue generation. You can never have too much revenue.
No.
And Burl was choking her business. I mean, you'd walk in and there'd be one chair, nothing on the walls. She would drive 15 or 20 miles to save money for Xerox paper, never thinking how much time it took her, let alone the gasoline and all the other things involved. And so she, one of the first things she did is she hired somebody to run her business, stayed out of her business. In fact, very much like I suggested to one of your VR brokers, if you remember, at one of the seminars that I gave recently, that he said that was it a coincidence that when he left the office for a month, it was the best month that the company ever had.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yes, I do.
And I said it wasn't a coincidence. Well, she did the very same thing. She left the business. She went to where her strengths were, and that was in the development side of it. So now she's prospered and she's made a great deal of money. She's very successful, but she is focusing on the few, and she's given up control of the day-to-day operations.
But you pinpointed that quick with her, if I recall. Early on, that was easy for her to identify that was her area of primary focus, to stop being a micromanager.
That's
Is that what
correct.
you're saying?
A micromanager.
All right.
Well, one of the things that I learned early on from one of my three mentors was that great independent thinkers, people that build great organizations, all have something in common, and they're macro managers, not micromanagers. They're not detail-oriented people. They believe in less control instead of more control. So when I met Burl, I asked her to walk me through what's a typical day for her. She says, I get up at 4:30, I get to the office by 6, which is not unusual.
Right.
And she looked at all the books, she looked at all the sales, she looked at all the planning, she looked at a lot of minutia. And after 5 or 10 minutes of her walking me through what a typical day looked like, I realized almost instantly that she was devoting a great deal of time to non-productive things. That's why you have controllers. That's why you have administrative assistants. That's why you have secretaries. That's why you have other people that work for you. And I think she hired in total about 3 people ultimately, and she freed up her time, and now she's doing what she does best, and it wasn't managing things on a day-to-day basis.
Very good. Now, tell us a little bit about the fly story, because that really illustrated to me, more than any other thing, a quick analogy of what people do wrong, including myself.
Okay. I'm glad you added including yourself. We've all grown up seeing flies hit their little heads up against window panes, and depending on the cleanliness of your house, you can see that on the windowsill there'll be little dead flies there from beating their brains out, flying time after time after time. And you can sit and watch them time after time after time. They'll continue to fly into the window. Now, you can also see this with birds sometimes. Birds will get caught in a house. And then 5 feet away, another open window, or 20 feet away, another open door, the fly could just as easily fly 10 or 15 or 20 feet and fly to safety. Why don't they do this? because they operate under the same premise that many people that are listening to this tape. Try harder is better. So they just beat their head harder against the pain until ultimately they kill themselves, as many of the people that run small to medium-sized businesses. Quantum thinking, quantum methodology is a complete reversal, 180-degree reverse, doing something completely different. Burl Crump's example, she stopped running her business on a day-to-day basis. Bruce Whipple's example, throw away all the prospects he had worked 3.5, 4 years on. It's really against conventional wisdom. I mean, most of the people would tell you that you don't drop all your prospects. Most people would tell you that you don't start something afresh 180 degrees. So the fly just as easily could have flown out the window. The listeners to this tape and the people that are out in business that are perhaps struggling or not being as successful as they'd like should sit back and think for a few hours, what would I do or what could I do that would really shake up my business and change it overnight? And that's what quantum thinking is all about. I mean, an example, Henry Ford, when he said make a V8, and they kept coming to him, you can't make V8s. You can't make V8s. One of the preeminent quantum thinkers, in my judgment, was Columbus. The world is flat, he's told. The world is flat. Right. Well, obviously, the world's not flat. You know, they told Einstein that, that time isn't in a curve. Time is a straight line. I mean, I could give you dozens and dozens and dozens of examples.
Yes, and in fact, I recall you saying that you also, prior to making your quantum leap, was also one of those same kind of people that were working harder and harder and harder all the time. And then you made the quantum leap, and that's what really, in fact, that's what created your seminar. Is that not correct?
Absolutely. You couldn't be more accurate. Up until 1976, when I was 31 years old, I used to spend Saturday and Sunday planning for Monday through Friday. I used to go in the office and work 6, 7 hours a day, getting caught up and planning down to the very detail. If he asked this question, I'd give this answer. If this happened, I'd have detailed notes, 15, 20 pages, for what I was going to do Monday through Friday. And then I attended a seminar, and one of my mentors, a gentleman named Jim Newman, who was a founder of the PACE organization, which stands for Personal and Company Effectiveness, he helped me understand that micromanagement isn't where the true greats of business and the true great entrepreneurs of our country, or any country for that matter, how they started. They started with an idea. They started with macro thinking. A great example of macro thinking or quantum thinking is when President Kennedy, on the day he got inaugurated in early 1960, he pointed up to the sky and he said, in this decade, we will put a man on the moon, land him safely before the Russians. Well, at that time, Don, there was no NASA as we know it. We had no missiles that could get more than a 200-pound payload off the ground. I mean, we had no infrastructure. But he was focusing on the end result. That's the ultimate macro thinking. He was a big picture person, and that's where I would suggest to the listeners in their business, whether they're a tailor or they run a grocery store or they run a real estate operation, how can they change their business dramatically? What can they do that would turn their business around 180 degrees? And then knowing that conventional wisdom is going to say, no, you can't do that, do it anyway.
Very good. Dan, I know one of the first things you have to do is create a foundation. What are the steps necessary to build that?
Okay. Step one in creating your own personal foundation is you have to feel good about yourself. You've heard me say this many times, but high-performance people all feel good about themselves. High-performance people all have a high self-esteem, high self-concept. Their self-worth is extremely high. So to start off with, you cannot get through the next steps 2 through 7, until you have built that self-worth. The way I did it, and the way I've known of many, many people to do it, is one, drive around in neighborhoods. You've heard this before, neighborhoods way before you can afford to buy the houses. Right. I had a Rolls Royce when I was 25 years old, and as my wife can attest to, we couldn't afford a Rolls Royce when I was 25 years old, which is now 24 years ago. It's hard to believe.
I noticed you just pulled up in a Rolls Royce.
Yes, I did. That's not the one I bought in
No, it was not.
24 years ago. I joined a country club before I probably could afford it. I hung around people that were were already in an economic strata that I wanted to be, as opposed to hanging around with the people that I went to school with. It's all about a comfort zone. It's all about feeling worthy. It's all about knowing that you really deserve these things. And as Henry Ford pointed out, I think you are who you hang around with, or you are what you think about. This is how you build that foundation. You learn that there's new rules. You make the rules. Society doesn't make the rules. As long as it doesn't break a law, as long as it's got integrity, you make the rules. And that's why I've said already that conventional wisdom is almost always wrong. You have to understand that, in my judgment, and I think virtually all high-performance people would agree with me, is that the ends do justify the means. As long as it's moral, as long as it's got integrity, as long as it's not breaking a law, I will do anything. I mean, in 1987, I was unfortunately away from my family 242 days. It was necessity. My partner died, and I had to be gone trying to run the business. But I am comfortable with making those decisions. I know that I have to be passionate when dealing with other people, because people will look to me, and people will look to the listeners that adopt this quantum leap methodology. They want to see passion. Have you ever seen a high-performance person that wasn't enthusiastic, that wasn't passionate?
No.
Have you ever seen a high-performance person that didn't believe in himself?
No.
No. I mean, they're very much comfortable. That without this personal foundation, and if I had to just say one thing, the one biggest difference between people that achieve high performance and people that don't, is that the people that don't feel comfortable with it. Because as you've heard me say before, many people fear success more than they do failure.
Yes. And I believe that is probably the first quantum step for some of our listeners, to go out of their comfort zone. You're talking about they're comfortable being around their cronies and so forth. This, again, is they're moving up in that area. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I'm a Hispanic, and I come from East Los Angeles originally. Even though I live in Los Angeles, and I live in Rolling Hills, a community that purportedly is one of the nice communities in the state, I have outgrown the things that I was most comfortable with as a little child. I have continued to increase my comfort level. One of the things I do with the businesses that I run, help run, and help grow, is that I bring them to my home. I want them to come to the Castle Seminar in Scotland. I want them to see the ambiance. You've been to the castle.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's a different experience.
You cannot believe it.
Yeah. The next time,
it's a real castle, folks.
Yeah.
It's a 15th century castle with a lock.
Yeah, that's right. And since you were there, we built a chapel. And we built a golf course.
That is great.
But I mean, next time you go to a castle, it's not going to be out of your comfort zone.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'm comfortable in yours, Dan.
Yeah. Okay. when the butler brings you something, you're not going to look at him strangely.
Right. But now I saw a picture of your house where you lived as a child, and that has graffiti all over it. I mean, there's a big jump from that graffiti-covered house, or the walls around it, to the castle, which is this 15th century castle. Now, what happened there? You just gradually moved out of that.
Well, I don't know if it's so gradual. Because,
okay, that's what I was
because it takes time. I've continued and still continue to put myself in situations that would normally give you a high anxiety. I intentionally put myself in positions that would normally cause tension. Now, my tension factor and my anxiety factor is really reduced now after doing this for 20, 25 years. But when I first started, I got as anxious as the people that are probably listening to this tape. This morning, before we came over to tape this interview, I was on television being interviewed here in San Diego on one of the local programs. And I can still remember the first time I ever was interviewed on television. I guess it was over 20 years ago, and how nervous I was. They had to keep on putting makeup on my forehead because I was perspiring.
Yes.
Yeah, and I kept on saying, don't they have air conditioning in this place?
There's a lot of lights.
Absolutely. But I've continued to put myself in positions. It's like now when we see professional athletes, Joe Montana, perhaps the first time he had to make a touchdown, throw a touchdown pass in the last 2 minutes of a big game, which was many, many years ago, he probably felt anxious. I assure you it's part of his comfort zone now. He just marches them down the field. and they score.
Right. Yeah, I believe he probably believes he's going to score. I mean, there is not a doubt in his mind, I think, that he's going to accomplish his goal.
It's the same when I go to a bank and I ask for money. I'm dumbfounded if they turn me down. I mean, I'm stunned because I'm so comfortable with, one, the proposal that I've had my people put together, and two, my ability to present a financial proposal now because I've done it a lot of times. And you have to keep practicing. And, you know, I've said this and people hear me say it. I said it this morning on TV. You have to kiss a lot of frogs. You have to continue to practice being successful. You have to continue over and over and over to replicate the feeling that you get when you're trying to make a sale, when you're trying to buy a business, when you're trying to enhance an opportunity with a financial institution. And that's a big difference between a high-performance, very successful person and the other people, because they don't. They try one or two times.
And then they walk. And I remember you saying you've approached 300 banks or hundreds of banks. I forget what it was.
300 financial institutions I personally have put forth presentations to. And, you know, Babe Ruth, he was the leading, until Hank Aaron beat him in home runs, he was the leading home run hitter, and he was the leading strikeout person in baseball. You can't hit a base hit or a home run unless you swing at the plate. Most people in business don't even step up to the plate.
Yes, I believe that's true. And I recall Burl saying that you told her there was something wrong if the bank always lent you the money. If they weren't refusing to lend you money, then she was making mistakes.
In 20-plus years with the Royal Bank of Canada, Burl had never been turned down. And I said, never? She says, never. I said, not even once? Not even once. I said, well, there's no question in my military or civilian mind, you're not asking for enough money. I mean...
so you wanted her to be turned down.
Absolutely.
All right, and that's the same thing here with the small business person or somebody's thinking about buying a business, that they ought to go in. Maybe this is one of their first steps into that, is to go into a bank and try to borrow some money, and asking even for more than they would need. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Along those same lines, there's probably a lot of people that are listening to this tape would never try to negotiate an interest rate on a mortgage, a fixed mortgage. I've been on the dais in front of the chairman of Chemical Bank and many other large banks, and I've asked them, aren't virtually all interest rates negotiable? And they say yes. And people just don't know that. One, they're not comfortable asking.
Right.
And unless you ask, I assure you, you're never going to get comfortable.
No.
It's like first impressions. One of the things about getting comfortable with a financial institution, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And that's why I tell them that people, you know, even though I know San Diego is kind of a laissez-faire atmosphere, but when I'm here on a business meeting, I mean, I show up in a suit. I give seminars in normally a three-piece suit because I like three-piece suits. And I would submit to them that they should act the same way. You want to be like the people that you respect in business. And it's all about a comfort zone. And there's an organization that I'm working with in Florida right now, that in Florida is a laissez-faire, laid back.
Yes, they are.
And they all used to come, you know, wearing jeans and sports shirts. And I told them that I would suggest that they all start wearing ties. Well, I just came back from Jacksonville, Florida, and they picked me up at the airport, and they looked like Coopers and Lybrand partners or IBM guys.
Right.
And the whole ambiance of the office changed. Then the girls started dressing different. And they started talking different. They started acting different. So when we were interviewing big six accounting firms to come in, I mean, everybody looked just like the big six accounting firms. And people want to do business with people that act like they do, think like, and therefore they think like they do. And that's all part of creating a comfort zone.
Very good. What is step 2?
Well, step 2 is clarifying your vision. Now, for me, my vision was succinct. I wanted to have the 50th largest natural resource company in the United States. At that time, it was Pennzoil. I wanted it to be $2 billion in assets. But part of my clarification of my vision was the actual goal-setting process. And I don't use dates. I find, and I think that most high-performance people would agree, that dates act as a hindrance. A good example is Ted Turner, the gentleman that founded CNN. And by the way, everybody said he was nuts when he founded CNN. It would never work.
I recall that.
And it would never work. They called him the mouth from the South. And it was a crazy idea. Well, you know, the rest is history. But his dad gave him the idea, and I've adopted it now. He says, Ted, set goals that you cannot finish or complete in your lifetime. Now, there's no time limit there.
Right.
And yet, I retired the first time when I was 39. I said I was going to retire before I was 40. What if I had said when I was 30, when I set the goal, I'm going to retire as soon as I possibly can? I might have built Great Western instead of 8 years. I might have done it in 3 or 4 years. All I knew is I had till I was 40. As it turned out, I did it on my 39th birthday. I had a year to spare. So in clarifying your vision, think of the very finite details. When I thought about the company I founded, I said, when I get off on the floor of the elevator, there's going to be Italian marble, and as I walk into in the big foyer of the reception area, there's going to be dark mahogany, and there's going to be a big, giant gold GW. Well, if you go to 1111 Bagme today in Houston, Texas, that's exactly what the foyer looks for Great Western Resources. You have to really think through what the vision is in a great deal of detail.
Color, real detail, and again, let's go back to where you were when you thought of this. Now, you're talking about a $2 billion company, but at that time, where were you?
Well, at that time, I was running down Torrance Boulevard, not too far from where you live.
No?
And,
at the time, I was probably walking down Torrance Boulevard.
with my wife, and I told her that I wanted to have a castle on an island, and she said, sure, honey, whatever you say. And then I said, and Great Western's going to be a $2 billion company, and I'm going to be one of the highest paid energy executives in the country. She's a good, supportive wife, and the mother of my 3 children. And she says, well, yes, Dan, whatever you say. Well, I had $820. I started the company in the spare bedroom with a leased fax machine and a phone. I had virtually nothing.
And now, wait a minute. Now, that's a quantum leap right there, Dan. I mean, somebody who would say that they've got $820 in their bank account and they're going to own and have a $2 billion company. That's a huge jump. I guess that's the quantum leap. Is that it?
Yes, but I mean, let's just look at it step by step for a second. You hear athletes that are interviewed, and they said, I've dreamt since I was 3 years old, 5 years old, of playing in the Super Bowl. Since I was 7 years old, of playing in the World Series. Now, for a little doofus kid who can barely pick up a baseball bat or throw a football, that's a pretty large quantum leap in the thought process.
Yes,
I'm going to play in the Super Bowl. Tiger Woods, the young man, 17 or 18-year-old young man that just won the United States Amateur. Since he's 3 years old, he saw himself, he talked about winning the United States Amateur since he's 3 years old. Wow. Now, I mean, the golf club was larger than he was when he was thinking this. So, I mean, these things that we're talking about, these precepts, this methodology is not new. I mean, this has been around since the beginning of time. But what happens is people, we forget how we thought as a youngster, as a child, as an adolescent. And now that my sons are getting into their adolescent years, I'd like to forget them being adolescents myself. But all I'm suggesting is high-performance people keep that thought process through their adult life. I mean, we didn't think it was so impossible, when we were saying that I want to play in the Super Bowl, when we said it. Yet, if we said, I'm going to have a $10 billion company, people would think we were crazy. When we played marbles when we were kids and we said, I'm going to win the United States Amateur when we're playing golf, I mean, it's not such a big, crazy thought.
In fact, the same thing is true when you start up a business or you buy a business and you have practically nothing, and you do make quantum leaps in growing that business, don't you?
By definition, if you start a business that's got zero income or $5,000 a year income, and you grow it to $100,000 or $200,000 a year, you've grown geometrically.
And then what happens? The person gets to $200,000 a year, and then all of a sudden, what?
One, you become satiated. Two, you start managing not to lose instead of managing to win.
Oh, that's such a good point.
And there's a huge, huge difference between managing not to lose and managing to win. If we created or we continued the same passion level that we had when we started our business throughout, and I did for 10 years, maintaining that focus, maintaining that passion, the growth would continue to accelerate at an increased level. But what happens is we start to believe conventional wisdom. Well, you can't continue to grow that business.
You can't do that.
You can't do that. And we believe it. And you've heard me tell the story. First year my youngest son played baseball, I went out and I taught him how to play baseball. I didn't play baseball, and I didn't know that Little League diamonds were smaller than Major League diamonds. Make a long story short, we practiced at the castle. They came and they made the team. And I told Derek batting 1,000 was good. He batted 640. his first year in Little League. His team won the Little League championship. He was the most valuable player. He was the only kid that could throw somebody out. He was a catcher, stealing second base. And then he found out what batting 640 was, that you couldn't do that. Ted Williams only batted 405 or something. Second year he batted 278 because he listened to everybody. 278 was good. So, I mean.
So he settled.
Absolutely. And that's what we do. We settle in life. We settle for a lot less. Our expectations are brought down to the norm. And that's where we get the term average.
Okay.
We lessen our expectations. When we're young, before we got scar tissued and beaten up out there in commerce, our expectations are much higher. That's why our business grows from 0 to 100,000, because we don't allow anybody to tell us we can't do it.
Because you know you can do the 100,000.
Absolutely. And,
right.
And the truth of the matter is you can also do the million, the 5 million, the 50 million.
Very good. All right, tell us about creating the dream team.
Well, that's step 3. Now, there may be a lot of smart people listening to this tape, and I'm sure there are, but I'm here to tell you you can't do it alone. You cannot take quantum growth, quantum methodology, and grow your business and do it by yourself. You have to enlist the help of others. And the way I did it is that I found mentors, and I had 3 mentors, 2 of which are still alive. And I found somebody that was where I wanted to be already, that was significantly older, significantly more successful, and that and I made it my business to become the son they never wanted, perhaps. And I spent a lot of time with those 3 mentors. I've already mentioned Jim Newman. I had Jerry Orman, the founder of Orman Industries, which was a conglomerate on the American Stock Exchange in the oil business, and I had Konstantin Gratsos, who was the chief executive officer of Manassas Shipping Lines. I was privileged for those 3 men to take an interest in me. 2 of the gentlemen, Mr. Newman and Mr. Orman, are still alive and semi-retired, and they still take an interest in me. So that's the beginning of the dream team. The second thing is that most of us are not dealing with banks or financial institutions that can take us to the next level. Most of you have what I call deposit relationships. You don't have a banking relationship. I mean, every business, even if it's a little small business, should have a line of credit. You should have more than just a deposit relationship. You should be dealing with a lawyer or a law firm that can represent you and that has what I call the full quiver of abilities to represent you. They have enough lawyers and enough expertise. You should all run your business like you were going to take it public.
So that means audited books?
Yes, I believe in audited books because, number one, you're probably at least twice, perhaps 3 times better off with financial institutions if you have audited books because they believe the audited numbers a lot more than they believe your own house numbers.
Right.
And if the audited books are done by a big 6 firm or a large regional firm, they're even going to believe them more because they know that the books are going to adhere to GAAP, General Accepted Accounting Procedures. So you've got now good accounting, you've got good legal representation, you've got a good bank, you've got your mentors. Now you have to understand that you have to determine where do you fall in your own dream team. Are you Mr. Inside, Mr. Outside? Where are your strengths? Any founder, any CEO, any entrepreneur of even a little business, the primary job should be trying to find capital to grow the business, number 1, and 2, looking for opportunities to grow the business. I myself attend a lot of meetings in a month's time because I'm continuing to look at transactions, I'm continuing to look at opportunities because I want my growth to continue, whereas most of the people that are in business sit and, as I've already pointed out, they manage the company not to lose as opposed to win.
Right. I hired to my weaknesses. That's what I felt that was my early training. And then, fortunately, been able to hire people that probably could have replaced me.
Well, one of them did replace me.
Yeah, did they?
Yeah, one of my team is CEO of Great Western Resources now. In fact, I talked to him not too many days ago. He still bounces ideas off me, even though I'm gone. I'm still the largest single shareholder of the company. It's a fairly large public company. But and surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, as you just said. And that gets back to the comfort zone. You can't do that unless you're comfortable with yourself, because you're always going to be worried about what are these people going to do. If you have any sense of insecurity, that'll be very difficult for you to do. But I'm telling you, it's the best thing to do to grow your business.
I recall you saying you had 5 people that wanted your job at all times.
Yes, there were 5, sometimes more than 5, and one of them eventually got it.
And you liked them.
Yes.
They were breathing down your neck.
They made me toe the line. They made me a much better businessman than I might have been if I didn't have those 5 people. High performance people want that kind of ambiance. They want that because it's like a think tank. I mean, we would come up with ideas and bounce them around, and we would either decide to carry an idea to fruition or kill it within a matter of minutes, as opposed to thinking about it myself and going through all the machinations myself. I had the ability to bring in my people and brainstorm instead of going to a think tank.
Right. In fact, sports, again, is another good analogy along that line, in that golfers, most of them prefer to play with a better golfer. Isn't that right?
Absolutely.
And I know you're an avid golfer.
Yes. I mean, my goal is to go down to be a scratch player, and right now I'm a single-digit player, but I play with people that are better than I am. I just played a couple of days ago. A good friend of mine that's a 3 handicap, and I beat you a couple of days ago by 1 stroke when we played, and much to his chagrin, he's probably sick. We're going to send him a copy of this tape. Yes, I mean, hang around and do business and be with people that can get you to the next level.
All right, let's talk about building the perception, step 4.
Well, perception is reality, and if you follow the first steps that we've already talked about, people are going to think you're more successful than you are to begin with, and that's good.
Yes.
Your banks are going to have more confidence. Your potential joint venture partners are going to have more confidence. Everybody will have more confidence.
And they have to have confidence in you. You have to have confidence in yourself.
Absolutely. And if you'll let me share a story about perception as reality, you and I had dinner not too many months ago.
Yes.
And you told the maitre d', you told the hostess, you told the waiter, everybody to bring the check to you.
That's right, because I'd heard you had paid everywhere you went.
That's exactly right. And who did they bring the check to?
You.
They brought it to me.
So annoying.
Yes. And well, that just happened to me in Florida. Perception. I look successful, and
That's true.
A gentleman in Jacksonville, Florida, asked the maitre d', who do you think, there was 7 of us sitting all in suits in the morning for breakfast, who do you think ought to get the check? And she pointed to me. Him, and says, well, why? He says, well, he looks like he ought to get the check. He looks the most successful at the table. He looks like the boss. Perception is reality. Now, at that table, I wasn't the boss. Wow. The gentleman that was asking the question was the boss. But all his employees, to his credit, he had the grit to ask that question. Yeah. But, I mean, people want to be in business with people that are perceived to be successful.
And I think you've got to expand on this, because I notice you're not wearing a Rolex watch.
No, I'm wearing a $8 Swatch or $12 Swatch watch. I don't know if that's...
Right. And a lot of people think that it's the jewelry or something else, and that isn't it. What you're talking about is the inward strength and what?
Yeah, well, that's part of it. It's the how you carry yourself, but it's also how you dress.
Right.
I mean, nothing against Rolex watches, but really high-performance people not too many of them do wear Rolex watches, because, I mean, everybody's got one. But it's how you dress, how you come across at a meeting, who takes control, how you travel, where you live. When I travel, I don't travel, and I travel a lot on planes. It would be a lot easier for me to wear a running suit on planes, but I don't travel like that because I don't know who I'm going to sit down next to. I don't know what business opportunity I'm going to have. It's how you're perceived. And there are many personal development speakers that are perceived to be very successful because the ambiance that they surround themselves with. I mean, Mr. Gates and Mr. Perot and Mr. Iacocca and those kind of gentlemen, and Mr. Scott more recently, are perceived in one way, and perception is reality. Health care deals now are brought to Rick Scott. I mean...
And this is a gentleman who used to work
that's
for
right.
you, as I recall.
Rick used to be my lawyer, and he, in the late 80s, went off on his own, and he has now made just a great deal of money, and he's one of the most successful corporate CEOs in America today.
I just read about him putting some deal together, which I thought was for multi-millions.
Billions. Well, his company, I think, will do about $15, $16, $17 billion in revenue. And he started with, now, this sounds like a lot of money, $125,000 life savings in 1988. when he went out on his own.
And this is 94.
Yep.
Late 94.
That's correct, and he has made a great deal of money. But Rick, perception is reality. Even before he got to this point, he had said, by the way, his goal was to control the health industry in the United States.
Lofty goal.
That's right. And he didn't say by when.
Right.
He's 41 years old now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, that gets back to one, his comfort level. He felt comfortable. He had a high self-concept. He didn't set time limits for his goals. And he hung around with the people that could put him in the position that he could hit that kind of home run. And he has. He's been very successful. It's perception is reality. And what I would submit to the listeners, they can become the part in their business. They can become the successful adjunct to their business. They can become the successful arm to their business. If they think it and if they believe it, they will do it.
Right. And that's as a result of encountering rejection and being comfortable with the rejection, because during the obtaining of these rejections, you also get some wins, and it puts you in a higher and higher level. Is that basically it?
Yes, that's basically it. But in addition to that, it's the idea that if you put yourself in positions where you're going to get anxiety, you become used to the anxiety, and anxiety ultimately disappears.
All right. What is the next step? Step 5, your Quantum Leap Action Plan growth. What is that?
Well, I mean, the Quantum Leap Action Plan is the plan that we do at the seminar for each attendee, but it's how we put together the specific objectives for the individual. It's how you maintain increasing growth as opposed to getting satiated and letting it flatten out. It's don't waste time on things you can't change. You know, I use the example, I'm not going to change my in-laws. I figured that out 20 plus years ago. Yet in business, we spend a great deal of time on things that we know we're not going to change. We either have somebody that works for us or is in our employ that does certain things the way we don't like them, yet we continue to go back and we try to change them. I mean, we're not going to change individuals. We're not going to change the way they think. So it's our job as the entrepreneur, as the leader, to develop a program around the people that we have. And if we can't do that, then we don't have the right people. It's developing an obsession, not just for ourselves, but for our people. I mean, you cannot grow a business geometrically in a quantum way unless your people are obsessed. They're in love with the idea. It's your job as the founder of the company, whether it's a grocery store or a real estate office, to develop that obsession, to work through that obsession and make sure that they have it. Because the idea is you must continue to grow. You have to grow. Now, it's also systematizing your organization. So you find out what works. Basically, high-performance people find out what works, and then they just do more of it. They try to do less of what doesn't work and more of what does work.
Very good.
Part of the action plan is knowing that you should investigate before you invest. I learned many, many years ago, I will reduce my losses in business, my losses in investing, if I do a lot of homework. In fact, I only make probably 2 or 3 investments a year. Yet we have people that spend more time on deciding where to go have dinner, where to go play golf, or where to go on a vacation than they do in some of their investment decisions. I hear people, being called up to buy stocks on the telephone to make decisions. Now, this is, only caveat, depends on how long you've had a relationship with your financial advisor, but with basically no homework. Right. That's not the way high-performance people do. Part of your growth plan is building your dream team that we've already talked about, and at the same time, understanding that your organization is going to be no better than the people you have. The 2 biggest leverages we have in life are other people and other people's money. Yes. And so that's how we develop that growth aspect.
And that's in a positive way.
Absolutely. I don't mean it in a negative way at all. It's a very positive way. The second part of the action plan is working capital, and everybody is concerned, where do I get money? Of course, you don't need money. I know, Don, because all that money you've got in the bank.
Yeah.
But everybody listening to this tape probably does need money. It's a matter of exposure. We've already talked about that I've made 300 financial presentations. I can guarantee, and there's very few guarantees I give, but there's somebody, someplace, somewhere on the face of the earth that will finance every funky idea that anybody that listens to this tape.
Make the presentations.
Make the presentations. It may be in Saipan
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you want the deal done bad enough, you'll see enough people, you'll turn over, I should say, enough rocks. Because most of the companies that are listening to this tape cannot grow their business by retained earnings. They can't grow it fast enough through debt, because that means they're going to have to carry the debt service. And there's not enough equity in their organization to sell off to the public. So you're going to have to make a lot of financial presentations.
That's it. And again, you told me a story once about somebody that sent out 700 or so. What was that story?
I was asked, and it gets back to making presentations. I taught a course where I went to undergraduate school, Cal State University, Northridge. And I had 15 students. We were having a workshop at my home in Palos Verdes, and they were all down, and they felt bad that they hadn't received the number of job offers that they thought they should. And so I had a young man there who was a Harvard graduate, a young man named Fidel Vargas. He happens to be the mayor of Baldwin Park outside Los Angeles, the youngest mayor in the United States. And I asked Fidel to step in front of the class, and I said, after asking every member of the class how many resumes they sent out, 3, 6, 12, the most anybody had sent out was 30. And I asked Fidel, how many resumes did you send out? And he says, 700, sir. And I said, how many job offers did you get? And he says, 1. Now, my class all looked very dejected, but say he really wanted a job,
Yes.
Fidel Vargas.
Right.
He sent out 700.
Right.
Now, and just the logistics of putting 700 resumes together is fairly awesome. The same holds true for financial institutions. You have to give a lot of financial presentations.
And you went all over the world.
That's correct.
Okay.
Other than Antarctica, I've been to every continent pitching for capital, money, debt,
Anything.
to grow the company.
Okay.
I've looked at virtually all the financial markets. You have to start with your own city, though. But I can go to a phone book here in San Diego, and I can go to any industry, and I can find a half a dozen companies in any industry that's listening to this tape and find somebody that's beating the trend and doing very, very well, and that has found capital to grow their business.
Very good.
There's no question about it. So, I mean, there's probably 500 financial institutions in San Diego County.
Let's regress a little bit. And you said that the primary job of the owner of the business or the CEO or the chairman is to search for capital. Is that right?
Search for capital, search for growth ideas, search for ways to make their business grow as fast as possibly can.
Okay. So that's why you were doing that at all times.
In my judgment, and not just my judgment, all the high-performance people that we've alluded to today, that's all they do. That's all the Gates, the Perot's, the Scully's, that's all they do. They're look for opportunities to grow their business.
Right, and so they're not running their business.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. I don't know one high-performance person that runs his business on a day-to-day basis.
And you were in the energy business, but you didn't really know how to drill the wells or anything like that, or...
That's an understatement.
Oh.
I'm not an engineer, a geologist, or a physicist. I don't know how to drill the oil for the oil. I didn't know how to do any coal mining. I wasn't an engineer, a coal engineer. I didn't know anything about a construction pipeline. I've been in the real estate business. I've been in the entertainment business. I've been in the insurance business. I don't really know anything about any of those businesses. What I do know is how to grow them by either acquisition, internal cash flow, and going out and continuing to look at deals, and that's what I do now.
And you're out right now looking at deals, looking at other businesses to go into, and you don't care what kind of business it is. It doesn't make any difference to you.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter to me. There are some industries that are hotter than others, but I mean, it doesn't matter.
Okay. And what size businesses are you currently looking for yourself right now? Does that matter?
Well, I mean, as little as a few $100,000 and as much as many tens of millions.
Okay.
So it really doesn't matter.
And then you're going to apply these same principles to whatever that business is.
Absolutely.
And so anybody that comes to your seminar, doesn't matter what type of business they're in, what size it is, whether they really understand that business. If they're coming from, let's say, an outplacement agency and they're thinking about buying a local mini-mart, that doesn't make any difference as long as they apply the principles.
That's correct. The principles are universal. As Napoleon Hill said many, many decades before I ever thought of it, the principles for success are universal. They've been around since time began, since man first crawled out of a cave someplace. There is no new thought vis-a-vis being successful and growing your business. These are old precepts.
your application is a lot different than anything that I'd ever heard from anybody. So your quantum growth ideas were, I believe, unique to you alone.
Well, I agree with that, but the basic precepts, because mine isn't just work harder, work smarter, it's work different and to think different. But I mean, people have been doing this since time began.
Oh, okay.
Now I've quantified it, I've put it in 7 steps, and I've lectured about it the last 10 or 15 years around the world. But it's not difficult. You've heard me say this before. I mean, if it was hard, as anybody that went to school with me would attest to, Pena couldn't have done it if it was too hard. So I would submit to anybody listening to the tapes that the quantum action plan is very doable, and you've seen me do it on dozens of occasions.
Yes, I sure have. Now let's talk about step 6. Pay yourself first. Every entrepreneur, every business owner I talk to, they're highly interested when I mention this, and this is what you teach. Tell us about that.
Well, it's not exactly how it sounds. Pay yourself first probably has different connotations to different people, but the one thing that I've learned, I'm on my third or fourth fortune, depending on how you want to categorize fortune, and through the economic cycles that I've been, I've seen people put off hitting the cash register, so to speak, and taking money out. They say, I'm going to put all my money back in my business so it'll grow that much better, that much quicker. I can't find investments that are growing as well as my own. Well, what happens is you get to the end of the cycle, 2 things happen. One, if and when you decide to sell, now you're at the end of the cycle, your business isn't worth as much. You've taken no money out, so you try to squeeze the last penny out of the business, and you can't. You have trouble selling it. And I know a lot of these people that are listening to these tapes buy and sell businesses.
Yes, they do.
So my recommendation is that I would submit that you should pay yourself, take money out of the organization. Every time you make a little bit of money, take a little bit of money out. This does 2 things. Number 1, you don't have to sell the business for as much when you get ready to sell it. And number 2, you've benefited, in case you can't sell it, all through the cycle.
Why don't you tell the story about the meeting you were at where the people were sitting in the audience and they mentioned that they really ought to just walk from their business, but they just owned it too long and they couldn't.
I was on the dais for the Center for Entrepreneurial Management about a year and a few months ago, and we were going around and talking to the various entrepreneurs there, and one of the entrepreneurs had lamented that in the last 3+ years, 3.5 years, he had lost or eroded approximately 60% of the retained earnings, the net worth of the company, that had taken him 35 years to build up.
Wow.
And
that's sad. I mean,
it's very sad, but I mean it's very typical. And I commented to him, and he was in the mature industry, and I said that you don't need to be Einstein or Gates to figure out that you probably ought to just turn the key and close the business down. And he told me that he couldn't. He emotionally couldn't turn the key. Now, and that brings up an interesting point. We have 2 checkbooks in life and in business. We have an emotional checkbook and we have a financial checkbook. And it gets back to being comfortable with yourself, most people have trouble growing their business past the initial stages because they're short of cash in the emotional checkbook, not in the financial checkbook. It's how comfortable you feel with yourself. At the end of the day, being a high-performance, super successful person is all about self-esteem. And we have to do everything we humanly possibly can to develop that self-esteem. So, I mean, it's paying yourself first, and I don't mean just you. I mean from the chairman, from the founder, from the business owner, all the way down to the lowest employee.
So you share the wealth all the way down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe in even giving away equity to employees to make them part of the team. People don't work for me, they work with me. We're partners.
Right. Well, as you know, on my last company, I gave away 15% of the company to my top person. And actually, that was really, really smart. And you don't sell it. You give it. I remember you just saying that.
One of the biggest questions I'm always asked is, do you really mean give it, Dan?
Right.
Do you mean that you give them at a discount? And they ask me 15 different ways. The answer is give it free and clear. And then the second question I'm asked, well, what if I have to fire him 5 years from now? What if he leaves? Well, then he leaves with 5%, or he leaves with 2%, or he leaves with 10%. Being a minority shareholder, at least in the state of California, doesn't give you too many rights. So, I mean, it's not like they can disrupt the whole company just because somebody owns 2 or 5 or 10%. So, I mean, give it. But take the money out and get used to those higher lifestyles, higher ambiance.
All right, then step 7 is creating your exit strategy. Tell us about that.
Well, it's sad, but just as I have alluded to in step 6, where the individual has not taken money out of his company, and then when it comes to the time where he thinks he wants to sell it, normally people want to sell their business when they get ill, unfortunately. Most people's exit strategy is dropping dead. Yep. And in fact, the insurance industry is the only industry that I'm aware of that really addresses exits properly. And of course, they have an axe to grind, and I'm not against it, but they're trying to sell you insurance to pay your taxes. But plan for your exit strategy. There's a blanket statement I use, and again, I don't give many guarantees or many blanket statements. But if you're in your 40s, your next economic cycle up, sell your business, because you may not be around for the next economic upturn. I hear people say, well, Dan, what am I going to do with the money? It's a lot better to have the money and have a problem on what to do with it than not to have the money and try to sell your business in a down cycle.
Right. And then lots of times, as you stated, they just kind of step aside. I mean, they don't want to sell it at the lower price, and they just get locked in.
That's absolutely right. But if you acted as you were going to go public from the very beginning, you've got audited books, you've got your house in order, and you've had an active PR program, if you will, that you've continued to look for deals, you've got a conduit of things happening in your business, it'll be a lot easier for you to sell it, as opposed to waking up one day because you find out that you've got ulcers, or God forbid you've got something worse wrong with you, and then trying to sell it.
So basically, your advice to every business owner, or even those contemplating into going into business, is to really go in with the idea of either selling it, or going public, or passing it down to their children or employees or something, but plan a strategy from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Nothing's forever. Glory is fleeting. Virtually everyone that I know that's a high-performance person, with very few exceptions, the Ford family and a few families like that have built companies that last, beyond their lifetime. There's a time to buy a company. There's a time to sell a company. There's a time to buy a business. There's a time to sell a business. And I would submit that the people should focus in on their exit strategy. Maybe the exit strategy is to sell the employees and some of their children, but to focus on that and then have their plans directed towards that exit.
Dan, I thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Don.
Quantum leap. What a concept. How can you apply this information in your business? Remember, information is not enough. It takes action to make your quantum leap. How are you going to look at your business in a new way? To contact Dan Pena, call 1-800-592-6886 or fax 713-933-6166. You can reach VR at 1-800-377-8722. This concludes this edition of the VR Mentor Series.